This is our bedroom. This is where we are at the moment. It's a bit pokey.
For the past year, Joanna and Henry Clough have called their friend's tiny spare room home.
Yeah.
Bit squishy, but we'll make it do.
Yeah.
Soon they'll need to squeeze another person in.
Baby's due on the 23rd of October this year, so not far away now.
Yeah, very exciting. Our housemate's really amazing.
But obviously it'd be nice to have our own home.
They should have their own house by now. In 2020, they engaged Adelaide Designer Homes to build them a property at Mount Barker in the Adelaide Hills. Instead, they've been left with a half-finished headache.
All the internal fixtures are left to do, so there's no electrical wiring, there's no plumbing done throughout the house, there's no gyprock on the walls, it's a bare bones house inside.
Adelaide Designer Homes was placed into liquidation last month, leaving theirs and about 20 other homes unfinished.
How do you feel being here?
It's pretty disappointing to see the building the way it is at the moment.
The couple says the build faced delays from the start. In 2023, the slab was poured, but then nothing happened for months.
My gut was telling me the big red flags were obviously popping up. I've got a best mate who's an electrician in the building game. My uncle's in the building industry. I knew a lot of people in the construction industry, and they were all saying, what's going on? It's just obviously been a really long process for us, and it's disappointing, but at the end of the day, there's not much we could do to control what happened, the last few years with the building industry.
Joanna and Henry join a growing list of casualties from a cascade of builder collapses post-COVID. Last financial year, a staggering 2,977 companies in the construction sector became insolvent. Adelaide Designer Homes is one of 601 firms to have hit the wall since July.
Insolvencies in the construction sector are at historic highs, and it's caused by a number of factors coming together all at once.
Adelaide Designer Homes succumbed to rising costs. Insolvency practitioner John Winter says the Morrison government's home builder grant offered during COVID led to a massive housing boom. But as the cost of building materials has gone up, construction companies often locked into fixed price contracts have come unstuck.
What's been happening is that erosion of their profit margin has been so large that they've ended up running each of their jobs at a loss. And there's only so long you can sustain that for before you end up being insolvent. And that's what's been characterising the market of late.
Last month, Reserve Bank of Australia Governor Michelle Bullock warned rising material costs were making it difficult to get inflation back to target.
It's still increasing by about 5% a year, building costs.
I don't think we've seen the full impact of inflation and rising interest rate costs in terms of what that's going to do to the entire sector. So I think we're going to see continually high insolvencies within construction for at least the next 18 months to 2 years.
Since COVID's come about, we've definitely tightened the belt. Hi, Kim.
Hey mate, how are you?
Yeah, good mate. We just had an urgent call up from one of the builders for a second fix, so...
Ralph Sabaski runs Adelaide business Star Electrical. He's feeling the pain of rising costs and staff shortages.
All our materials have just skyrocketed. Cable, in regards to copper, was probably the worst, which went up by about 70%, and that was over increments. PowerPoint switches, clips, everything that goes in the job also went up by at least 50%, and unfortunately nothing's come down.
Not only is Ralph struggling with the high cost of doing business, he's owed $80,000 by collapsed firm Adelaide Designer Homes. It's the 7th builder he's been contracted to, which has gone bust over the past 15 years.
Obviously, I paid the wages for our electricians, materials for all of those jobs. So yeah, well, of course I would have loved to have been paid. Luckily, we're busy and we can work our way through it, but look, it definitely hurts.
The home building industry crisis comes at a time of growing demand. The federal government has set a target of building 1.2 million new homes over the next 5 years.
When you've got such a lofty goal of building so many new properties, it's going to be hard to meet that when there isn't the capacity in the market. That risks forcing prices up.
Economists predict the government will fall 260,000 homes short of the target. The New South Wales Productivity Commission says public infrastructure projects are taking sorely needed tradies from the housing sector. In South Australia, Ralph Sabaski says it's a similar situation.
Unfortunately, a lot of the A-class electricians are always asking for more and more money, and they go off to another job that's obviously offering more money.
Welcome to QBE Insurance. Before we transfer you to a claim specialist, please listen carefully.
Thankfully for Joanna and Henry, Adelaide Designer Homes was required to carry insurance. But if there's a shortfall between the payout and cost of finishing their home, the couple will have to dip into their own pocket.
We've contacted over 25 different builders and around half of them felt and sounded like Adelaide Designer Homes, but I don't know if it was just because I've got that feeling now of distrust.
They want to see more transparency from builders to protect customers.
You know, how many contracts have they got? How delayed are they? Are they on time? All those sort of things that can lead you to understanding the position they're in.
This is our kitchen, living area, dining area. We can see it now with the bricks, which is great.
Yeah.
Joanna and Henry are trying to stay positive and hope their long-awaited dream home might be completed by Easter.
Obviously, we're not going to have a house before the baby comes, but I think it's just important to, relish in the fact that we've got a little one coming along, not to stress too much about the house. Hopefully we can have everything sorted with a new builder before baby comes, and we can just have those exciting trips up the Adelaide Hills to see the house and the progress that's happening.
The collapse of construction companies and a shortage of tradies are just some of the issues besetting the housing industry. In Canberra today, a long simmering battle between the Albanese government on the one side and the combined opposition of the Coalition and Greens on the other has come to a head in the Senate as the government attempts to push through two major pieces of housing policy. Clare O'Neil is the Housing Minister. Clare O'Neil, welcome back to 7:30.
Great to be with you, Laura.
This is your first 7:30 interview since taking over the housing portfolio. Before we get into the situation in the Senate or your announcements today, can you give us a picture of the state of the housing construction industry that you've inherited and what you see the supply problems to be? And we might talk a little bit about some of the problems that have been discussed in that story we've just been watching.
We have a housing crisis that's been a generation in the making. For decades, our country has not been building enough homes. So our government is the first in many years to say that the Commonwealth has got a real role in this discussion. We've stepped into housing and said that we're going to take some responsibility for this problem. We've sat down with the states and said we've got to build more homes. So we've set this long-term target over 5 years of building 1.2 million homes. We also see that Australians are really hurting right now, and that's why there's immediate relief available too. We've lifted the Commonwealth rent assistance payment by 40% since we've come to government, and we've helped 110,000 Australians get into home ownership. We've got these two bills too in the Senate, so we're tackling the problem from every possible angle here, building more homes, helping people who are renters, and making sure that more Australians can get into home ownership.
Well, as you say, lots of different problems. How do you do scale? How do you build up scale when you've got a sector plagued by the sorts of insolvencies we've just seen in that story?
Look, I'm really confident that we are going to get scale and that we are going to see numbers lift. There are things going on in this sector that the government cannot fix immediately and control, but there's a lot that we can do. If I can just point you to some of the issues where government does have a really significant role. If I talk to the construction industry today, mostly the first thing they will talk to me about is labour shortages. We've got a real problem with skills in construction, and you've seen our government make these incredibly important investments in our training system, in apprenticeships and the like. There's more that we need to do there. We've got issues around land and planning, and this is some of the work that the Prime Minister has done at National Cabinet, working with the states who control these levers, but there's a lot of work going on there at the moment. We've also got some tax changes sitting in the Senate, which will make sure that construction projects face lower taxes. We're the first government in a really long time to step in and say our citizens are hurting and we want to do something to help, and that's why you're seeing us really tackle this problem from every possible angle.
Well, just on that skills issue alone, as you've said, there's training involved here, but do you need to bring more tradies in?
Look, our first port of call with skills is always going to be training Australians, and these are absolutely fantastic jobs, lots of opportunities. But I would also say that I think the migration system is not working for the sector at the moment, and that's been pretty clear in my discussions with them. So we're just having a conversation at the moment about how we can make sure that the migration system is open to construction trades as it is with other professions.
You've announced the first round of contracts from the Housing Australia Future Fund today. Are you on track to meet your goal of 1.2 million homes over 5 years? The master builders have said you might just get to 1 million by 2029.
Well, let me just, the first part of your question is about the Housing Australia Future Fund. I just want to make sure your viewers understand this is a $10 billion investment that our government has made in making sure that we have secure, affordable housing. The announcement today is 13,700 new homes that will go to key workers, to women and children fleeing domestic violence, and to older women who are at risk of homelessness. So really important things. And we've set a target to try to meet 1.2 million homes over 5 years. You asked if it's achievable. What I can tell you is it is bold, it is ambitious, and that is exactly the kind of thinking we need if we're going to get any traction here. If we're all sitting around saying it's too hard to address this crisis, we're going to be in a crisis forever. What we need is a galvanising target, and that 1.2 million is it.
Well, you've come to this portfolio from Home Affairs. What role is migration playing in terms of the demand for housing, and what extent will the decisions taken recently on overseas students help take the pressure off?
Migration is a part of the story here, but most experts will tell you that it's not the dominant part of the story. We just ran a natural experiment of this in our country where during COVID our population went down for the first time since the Second World War, and at the very same time house prices skyrocketed. So there's a bit going on the demand side. Migration's part of the story.
Well, you've got the two bills stuck in the Senate. One of them is Help to Buy. The second one is the Build to Rent. Mm-hmm. That seems to be more contentious. The Property Council says, as it's currently set up, the Build to Rent scheme will be, quote, completely ineffective. What's your capacity to think about broadening it out so that not-for-profits might be able to take part in it, or onshore developers rather than just the foreign investors who are sort of targeted initially? Mm-hmm.
So this scheme is a bit more complicated, but at the end of the day, what it will do is build more rental properties in our country, rental properties that we desperately need. It sets up a financial model that allows that to occur. So just quickly, super funds here in Australia are very invested in this model of housing overseas, but they're not investing in it in Australia because our tax system basically stops them from doing it. So we're trying to address that issue. We are talking to the crossbench about their views about that bill, and we'll be making sure that we bring forward the very best bill to the Parliament. What I would say about these two bills is that they're a really important piece of the puzzle, and we're seeing lots of crossbenchers come out publicly today to call on the Coalition and the Greens to come with us on this.
Well, you have negotiated with the Greens when it came to getting past the impasse on the Housing Australia Future Fund. Why can't you make some compromises now?
Well, I would very much like to see this through the Parliament, and the reasons for that have got nothing to do with politics at all. It's because I actually care and I actually want more Australians to access home ownership, and I only wish that we had people in other parties who made that commitment. I'm very happy to talk to the Greens. I'm happy to talk to the Liberals, though they've not been willing to engage in a meeting with me about this. I am still hopeful that these bills have got a pathway through the Parliament, and that's the optimism I think we need here. What I would say is that we don't just have a broken housing market in this country, we've got broken housing politics. And I just find it really, really disappointing that people are talking a big game on housing and stopping us from taking action on it, and they do need to be accountable for those activities.
How many homes do you expect to actually be built under the build to rent scheme?
Look, there's varying estimates of what will happen. Most experts who've looked at the bills say there is the potential for tens of thousands of new units to be built. If we get the bill right, I think we're looking at, the Ernst & Young modelling says 90,000 new rental properties over the decade. We don't have good Treasury modelling on this, but what I would just say is when we step back from it all, we need to build more homes in our country. Build to rent will help us build tens of thousands of additional rentals, and it's a really important part of the overall puzzle that will see us address the really significant housing issues in the lives of Australians.
Clare O'Neil, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Laura.